And we're live.
Hello, Greg. Hello to you out there, advanced English learners. Welcome to another live conversation between Greg and Mary Daphne. So, how are you doing, Greg?
I'm doing quite well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm excited about this topic because it's something that you'll get asked a lot by people that you're, meeting for the first time, by your friends, by the interviewer, right? When you go to a job interview held on Zoom or in real life, you'll still get this question. And it's about...
What's the question?
Yeah.
Leaving us hanging here.
All the suspense.
Yeah.
Well, it's about talking about your hobbies and your interests.
Okay.
And answering the question, what do you do for fun?
Right. Yeah. I mean, you do get that a lot, and across all different contexts, right? So
Yeah.
both professional and social.
It's true.
And yeah, you want to have a good answer because you want to sound like an interesting, fun person to work with,
Yeah.
to be with, to spend time with.
Yeah. And I think, when you're talking about it in the scope of when you're answering this question at an interview, right, the best answer is the one that is genuine and that you actually do. You don't want to talk about, your love of chess, playing chess, if you don't actually do that. Just you think just because you might think it'll impress certain people. But that being said, you do have to keep in mind like the context, like Greg was saying, that it's across contexts. And that's why it can be a little bit challenging to figure out what hobbies, because you have so many, right? What hobbies to really bring to light in certain contexts.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of situations where, how my answer would change across different situations.
Right.
What I think is effective when answering this question, and a lot of these questions, this is a personal question, right?
Yeah.
And so if you immediately provide an answer that sounds very, scripted, meaning very rehearsed, very practiced, it's going to sound impersonal. So for a personal question to get an impersonal answer is not ideal.
Yeah.
So regardless of sort of how you answer it, it's okay to show a little thought, in that moment as to how you will plan to answer it. Because you do need to think about, okay, in this context, like it's a professional context, I'm probably going to focus more so on, skills that are related to the job, right? Whereas if it's with a friend, I might focus more so on, something like something I would enjoy doing with them, right? Something I'd enjoy spending time with them doing.
Yeah.
That would be, an example of how I might tailor it. Both, by the way, are still honest answers.
For sure.
Right? Both are true interests of mine. But obviously, we don't have time, nor do they want to hear every interest that we have. So it's sort of on us to choose the right answer, the right interest for the right audience.
Definitely. I love that you brought that up because you're really then tailoring your message, in this case, the answer to the question, what do you do for fun, to the specific audience. So I can think of one example where I might not, let's say I have a side hustle, meaning we talked about this in another conversation, where I have a full-time job, but on the side, I have a passion project that I am pursuing. So maybe my passion project is my Etsy shop. So maybe I sell handcrafted goods and I put them on Etsy. I don't actually do this, but I think it'd be an awesome side hustle. And I know someone who can do that. But basically having a side hustle where it takes up a lot of my time, right? Let's say I'm doing this as soon as I get home from work and on weekends. Now, that could be perceived as a hobby in some ways. Now, if I'm talking about this to my future employer in such a passionate, excited way about my hobbies, that might signal that I'm not fully committed to doing something there, to that specific role or job. So you have to be a little bit careful, right? It's great to be passionate about hobbies. It's great to have your interests, but do keep in mind that the way you talk about it could signal something else in terms of where your, what's the word I'm looking for? Your allegiance lies.
Yeah, and
right?
I really like that word signal, right, in that context, because signal is effectively saying you're alerting them, right? Like, think about a traffic signal is telling you which direction to go, right? You're signaling to your employer.
Yeah.
And I totally agree with you. You want to signal your ability, your capabilities, and your dedication to whatever it is the job is related to or the company is focused on. So another example of this is, let's say you're applying to some like a coal power plant, right?
Yeah.
And you talk about how your passion is saving the environment and growing trees and all this. The interviewer is going to be kind of scratching his head thinking, well, why are you applying to a coal power?
Yeah, exactly. It's like you can't like get behind a mission that is so antithetical, so different, so opposite what you're actually doing, right? Your actions speak louder than words in a lot of cases.
Totally. Yeah, your hobbies say a lot about who you are.
Yeah.
And that's why people ask that question in the first place.
Yeah.
It's not because they necessarily want to, do exactly what it is you're doing or that they care specifically what it is that you do. They just want a better picture of who you are.
Yeah.
And hobbies, the things you do when you have free time, are one of the best insights into who you are, in the broader context of the world.
Right. So like, let's say you have like a health and fitness YouTube channel that signals that you take, healthy living seriously. And so maybe, what you do with your full-time job could, somehow align with that, in that maybe you're working for a eco-friendly beauty company or something like that, where it's kind of like aligned. So sometimes our hobbies do help trickle into and inform what we do the majority of the day in a lot of ways too.
I think that's a great example. Yeah. It's one of those things also where the answer can change over time, right? And even somewhat frequently. For me, in one half of the year, I might be really into computer programming and doing a lot of coding.
Yeah.
And then in the second half of the year, I get really into working with audio-visual equipment, right? And optimizing sound and all of that. And so it's also important to keep in mind that your hobbies can change, and that's fine. And that's why it's nice to, I think regularly reflect on what it is you enjoy doing outside of your, paying job.
So I have a question. At which point does something that you create as a habit, let's say like working out, become a hobby, or is it is it different from a hobby? So do you view something like working out, which we both do every day, as a hobby, or is that a habit? And can hobbies be habits? Yeah,
that's a great question, right? What's the difference between a hobby and just something you do?
Right.
For me, I would say one of the key signals of a hobby being a hobby is that when you are sort of twiddling your thumbs, right? You don't have anything to do.
It's like doing this.
Right, twiddling your thumbs, and you're just deciding what to do. The next thing you decide to do could very well be a hobby. If there's something that you regularly return to, right? It's not something you do just once, but something you often do when you don't have anything else to do. Yeah. To me, that feels like a hobby, right? It's
as opposed to a habit.
As opposed to a habit, which is often something that you do because you need to do it, right? You do it, like, for example, working out. I know that's good for me. It's easier to not work out, but I work out anyways. It's a habit of mine because I know it's good. Yeah. I wouldn't call it a hobby of mine,
right?
Because in a perfect world, I would only work out when I wanted to, and it's probably less than I should.
And that's so funny because for me, like, I have to force myself to take the rest days.
Exactly. So for you, it could more be a hobby, right? You often, if you have free time, you decide, hey, you know what? I think I'm going to do a workout.
Right.
And that's why she's so fit.
Well, you're fit too, thanks. But it's true that, it's funny to see how the amount of time and the regularity with which you do something can sometimes be taken from a habit into a hobby, or like you think of maybe like a habit as something that you just do every single day without thinking. It's almost automatic. Whereas with the hobby, you derive a lot of pleasure from it.
Yeah.
And you enjoy it so much
I like that.
that you may do it every day. But with that hobby comes this sort of like understanding that you really enjoy it so much.
It's deliberate. It's purposeful. I really like that. You're very present in that activity.
Yeah.
I really like that. Yeah. And I think the big thing is that there's no sense of obligation.
Yes.
With a habit, it may be because of an obligation,
Yeah.
or associated with the obligation.
Yeah, it's a good one.
A hobby is really just, it's something you just like to do. And when you get the opportunity, you'll do it.
Yeah.
And there's no real, there's no one telling you have to do it, or any underlying reason why you should do it.
Right. It's for fun.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. How would you answer the question, what do you do for fun, when you're talking to friends or to our viewers out there?
Yeah, I would say for me, one of my favorite things to do is just to learn about the world. So one of my favorite things, one of my hobbies, is just to go through all my email newsletters, right? We all have a lot of email newsletters that come into our inbox. Most of us don't really read many of them.
That would be me.
I love reading all of them because I'm
you're
very
good
careful
about
about
that.
what I subscribe to, and I aggressively unsubscribe from anything that I don't want to read. And so my inbox is always full of stuff I like to read.
Yeah, that's good.
And so it's a little bit of a habit to read it, but it's more so of a hobby for me because not only do I read the emails, I'll often click into the links in the emails and read an associated article with it, right? For me, just that building the knowledge and learning about really random topics is definitely a hobby of mine.
And it makes for a great conversation too. And you always find ways of, I mean, then you teach it to me too. And I'm like, wow, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating how much knowledge there is out there that we don't even know and we're not even aware of. And it just changes your perspective in so many ways. So I love that one. That's a really good one. I'm trying to think for me, like at the moment, currently what my hobby, I mean, in addition to like working out, because I do enjoy it so very much.
I think that's a good one.
In addition to that, I really, I started getting into, thanks to Greg, I've always been interested in illustrating and drawing, but now we decided to take that to a digital medium. And so we are now, well, I am trying to learn how to like turn drawings on digital, like on an iPad, into like an animation. So right now I'm like working on the sketches because there is like a little bit of a switch you have to make when you go from sketchpad and pen or whatever medium you're using, like a pastel crayon, to then, you know, a digital experience. So I'm familiarizing myself with that. I think also if you answer that question, like Skillshare courses or YouTube courses or educational courses, like that could definitely be a hobby.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, definitely.
So there's a lot of ways to answer it. And just to wrap up, right, you want to really be mindful of the participants, like who you are sharing this message with, who are you speaking to, and what the context is. Is it a professional setting, like an interview? Are you at a professional setting, like at a networking event, where it feels a little bit more casual, but it's still professional, right? So that's something to keep in mind. Or is it just a casual conversation with friends?
Yeah, a lot to think about. And again, it's a fluid concept, right? What you do today could be different from what you do a year from now. And embrace that sort of variation in your life and let that come out when you answer the question.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
So thanks so much for joining us. If you have certain hobbies that you want to share with us, feel free to comment below. And we will see you next week for another lesson with Advanced English. We'll see you then.
Have a good
Bye.
one.